Ever get that feeling?
Yeah.
Like your thumb's got a mind of its own,
Yeah.
just endlessly scrolling and scrolling. Social media,
Yeah.
drained,
Yeah.
maybe even like a little angry afterwards.
It's like a tug of war for your brain.
That's exactly it. And that's what we're diving into today. How social media, affects us, our families, our communities, but also how we can use it for good.
Yeah.
We're looking at a really interesting sermon today. It's called The Untamable Thumb.
Wow. That's an image.
It really is.
I like it.
What do you think about that title?
I think the metaphor is really fitting.
Yeah.
Our thumbs have become such a powerful tool, right, for communication.
Mm.
But just like, we've heard about the tongue, they can be used for good or for bad.
Yeah. And the sermon starts off with this analogy about orange juice.
Okay.
So you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. You can squeeze it as hard as you want. You're never going to get apple juice. And the point is, what comes out of us when we're squeezed by life kind of reflects what's already inside.
It's like that pressure reveals what's truly there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful image. And I think, it speaks to how important it is to cultivate inner peace and that ability to bounce back, especially online, because it's so easy to just react to everything we see on social media. But this reminds us that we actually have a choice.
Yeah. So instead of that knee-jerk reaction, maybe take a breath, maybe step back and ask yourself, what's going on here? Is this even worth getting upset over? And what kind of response would actually be helpful right now?
That's it, that intentionality. Because, let's face it, social media can feel like a constant squeeze. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's waiting for a reaction.
And it's easy to get sucked into that negativity.
Totally.
Then the sermon goes into James 3.
Yeah.
Compares the tongue to fire. That could set a whole forest ablaze.
I mean, think about it. That analogy is even more relevant now than ever. The speed that misinformation can spread online, especially with bots. Did you know that research has shown that false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth online?
Wow.
And almost half of all social media activity is actually driven by bots.
Really?
47%.
That's wild. So it's not even just real people with strong opinions. You're also dealing with these automated accounts.
Exactly.
That are trying to manipulate or mislead us.
It's almost like a minefield out there. Discernment is key.
Yeah.
We need to be critical thinkers, check our sources, think about our own biases.
Right.
It's so easy to get trapped in these echo chambers where you only see what you already believe.
Which brings us to the darker side of that untamable thumb that the sermon talks about. That quote from James about the tongue, an unruly evil full of deadly poison.
Yeah.
It's kind of chilling to think about how one careless post or comment online can really spiral into something really harmful.
It's like, a digital poison. It spreads through families, communities, even whole societies. And the thing is, the anonymity of the internet makes people bolder. People say things they'd never say face to face.
Oh, yeah. We've all seen how that online negativity can spill over into the real world. Broken relationships, reputations damaged, even sometimes violence.
It's almost like social media gives us permission to be our worst selves.
Yeah. And it's not even just the words, right? It's the way these algorithms are designed. They're set up to keep us hooked on negativity and outrage.
Totally. The more we engage with that stuff, the more they feed it to us. It's a vicious cycle. Hard to break free.
I've definitely been sucked into that cycle before. You read a comment thread, things are getting heated, and you just can't resist jumping in. An hour later, you're like, what am I doing? Arguing with strangers about something that doesn't even matter.
We've all been there. I think the first step is just recognizing those patterns in ourselves and then maybe looking for ways to manage how we engage online. Maybe it's time limits or being more intentional about who we follow, or even just sometimes taking a break, stepping away when you feel overwhelmed. It's interesting. We've been talking about individuals, but think about the impact on our relationships. Families on dinner, everyone on their phones instead of talking. Friends hanging out, but they're more focused on getting the perfect selfie than actually connecting with each other.
Yeah.
It's almost like intimacy and just being present with each other is slowly being chipped away. And that can really affect our well-being. We crave connection, but then we look for it in all the wrong places.
Right.
And it pushes us further away from the people who are right there with us.
It makes you wonder if we're trading real connection for like the illusion of connection.
Yeah.
All those likes and comments, it's like we're chasing some digital high that never quite satisfies.
And then there's the comparison game.
Oh, yeah.
Social media often shows us this like perfect curated version of reality, which can make us feel like we're not enough or make us jealous of other people.
It's like you're constantly comparing your behind the scenes to everybody else's highlight reel. It leads to like resentment, insecurity. You start feeling dissatisfied, not just with yourself, but with your relationships too.
It's so important to remember that social media is not real life.
Right.
It's just a snapshot, a highlight reel. It's not the whole story.
So then how do we break free from all this negativity and comparison? The sermon talks about this contrast between earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom.
James 3, verses 13 through 18.
Yeah.
It says that earthly wisdom is sensual, demonic, driven by ego and pride and the need to be right. But heavenly wisdom that's described as pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits.
So it's about shifting our focus from trying to promote ourselves to trying to understand,
Right.
from winning arguments to building bridges. And speaking truth, yes, but speaking it in a way that's respectful, that's compassionate.
And that can be really tough in the world of social media. Everything's so polarized.
Yeah.
It's a challenge worth taking on, though, because, ultimately we should be using our voices online to try to promote healing and unity and understanding, not division and anger and all that negativity.
That's powerful. Makes me wonder, on a personal level, how can we actually make a difference online? How can we use our thumbs for good instead of letting them run wild?
It's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore more in the next part of our deep dive. It's amazing to think about how much social media is a part of our lives now. It's not even just how we use it ourselves anymore. It's shaping how we function as families, as communities.
Yeah, I was just reading something about how some families actually have device-free dinners now
Yeah.
to encourage actual conversation.
Wow.
Kind of sad that it's come to that, but also encouraging to see people realizing they need to reclaim those moments, those connections.
For sure. And it's not about like demonizing technology. It's more about, are we being mindful of how we use it? Is it costing us those real life relationships? I remember reading this study. It found a link between more time on social media and less empathy. The idea being, the more we're interacting with these curated online profiles, the less we're actually practicing connecting with real messy people.
Yeah. Like we're substituting real empathy with performative empathy.
Right.
Like hitting like on a post about somebody's struggles instead of actually reaching out to them.
Exactly. And that can have a ripple effect, in our families, in our communities. If we're not practicing empathy online, it's probably going to show up in our offline relationships too.
The sermon talks about discernment, which I think is so important these days. And it's not just being careful about what we're putting out there ourselves, but being discerning about what we're taking in.
Yeah, like curating our digital diet, choosing to follow accounts that are positive and uplifting, and being cautious about sources that are just, pushing negativity or misinformation, and even knowing when to just take a break from it all.
Yeah. The sermon actually lays out this really practical tool. They call it the thumb test.
Okay.
It's 3 questions to ask yourself before you post anything online. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it loving?
That's great. It's so simple, but so powerful. If we could all just stop and honestly answer those questions before we hit post, I think we'd see a real change in how people are interacting online.
It's almost like flipping the script.
Yeah.
And instead of getting caught up in all that negativity and drama, we can use our voices online to spread some good, some encouragement, some hope.
And that's contagious too. Imagine if we all made a conscious effort to leave kind comments, to share stories that inspire, to have respectful conversations online. Maybe it would inspire others to do the same. And slowly that online environment starts to shift to a more positive, supportive place.
Yeah, like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. It works online just as much as it does offline.
Absolutely. And it starts with those little everyday choices. Choosing kindness over anger. Sharing a story that builds people up instead of one that feeds into fear. Unfollowing accounts that drain you and looking for ones that lift you up.
Right. It's about recognizing that we actually have the power to shape our own experience online.
Right.
And in turn, we can affect other people's experiences too. We're not just passively consuming content, we're active participants in creating this online world.
That's where that idea of taming our thumbs really comes in. It's not just about restraint, it's about taking ownership, using our voices to make a positive difference.
It's like digital discipleship almost.
Yeah.
Taking those values of love and compassion and grace and letting them guide how we use our online platforms.
Right, recognizing that even online, our actions have real consequences. And we have a responsibility to use our influence for good.
Which reminds me of something else the sermon talked about, speaking the truth in love. It's not enough to just be right. It's about communicating in a way that shows respect, that's compassionate, that seeks to understand.
I mean, that can be really, really tough, especially online.
Yeah.
When emotions are running high in the heat of the moment.
Right.
But those are the times when it's most important to pause, to take a breath, to ask ourselves, is this response actually loving? Is it going to build bridges or burn them?
And sometimes, the most loving thing to do is to just listen, to try and understand where the other person is coming from without feeling like we have to jump in with a correction or an argument.
That's so true. We're so focused on debate and argument these days. We've kind of forgotten how to just have a dialogue, how to seek understanding. But real communication, it takes an open heart and a willingness to see things from different perspectives, even when we don't agree.
And that's really hard to do online when it's so easy to get caught up in that back and forth and you forget there are actual human beings behind those screens.
Exactly. It's about remembering that everyone we encounter online is a person.
Right.
They have feelings and experiences and viewpoints that might be different from our own.
It's about recognizing that shared humanity.
Yeah.
Even when we disagree.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real antidote to that dehumanizing tendency that we see online so much.
It's about remembering that every comment, every post, every interaction is a chance to make a choice, to add to the negativity or to be a force for good.
It's about using our thumbs, our untamable thumbs, to build a world that's more loving, more compassionate, more connected, one interaction at a time.
I love that. That's a vision that's both inspiring and it feels doable. It reminds us that even though the online world seems so vast, our individual choices actually do matter.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this question. How can you use your thumbs for good today? What small but meaningful act of kindness or encouragement or truth can you share with the world?
It's kind of ironic that we talk about taming our thumbs, like they have a mind of their own, right?
Yeah, right.
But really, it all comes back to the heart, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
What we put out there, online or offline, it reflects what's inside. The sermon, it uses that image from James 3:8 about the tongue being an unruly evil full of deadly poison. It really makes you think about the power of our words.
It does, especially in this digital age, right?
Especially now.
It's easy to forget that words have consequences, even online.
Yeah.
It seems so fleeting, but they can build up or tear down, encourage or discourage, heal or wound.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
But the good news is we have a choice, right?
We do.
We can choose to spread negativity online, or we can choose to spread love and kindness and hope. And I think that choice, it starts with awareness, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Recognizing the power of our words.
Right.
Recognizing that they can be used for good or for bad. And being mindful of the impact our online behavior has on ourselves and on other people.
The sermon actually gives some really practical advice on how to make those positive choices.
Okay.
It talks about discernment, knowing when to speak up, when to stay silent, and how to speak effectively.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was that emphasis on speaking the truth in love.
Yes.
It's not enough to just be right. We have to communicate in a way that's respectful, compassionate, understanding, even and maybe especially when we're talking to people who have different views than our own.
And that's tough, especially online.
It is.
It's so easy to get caught up in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Say something you regret later.
Totally.
That's why it's so important to develop that habit of pausing before we post.
Yes.
Take a breath.
Right.
Think about the impact of our words. Ask ourselves, is this really the message I want to send out into the world?
That's such a good point.
And sometimes, like you said earlier, the most loving thing is just to listen.
Yeah.
Trying to understand the other person's perspective.
Right.
Without feeling like we have to jump in and correct them or argue with them.
We live in such a debate-driven culture.
Yeah.
It's all about winning, not understanding.
Right.
But real communication, real connection, it requires listening with an open heart and being willing to see things from other people's perspectives.
Yeah. The sermon reminds us that, whether we're online or offline,
right,
our interactions should be guided by that greatest commandment.
Yeah.
To love God and love others as our soul.
Absolutely.
If we can keep that in mind, it'll change how we use social media. It'll help us see every interaction as a chance to reflect the love and grace of Christ.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
It does, and it brings us back to that thumb test.
Yeah.
Those 3 simple questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it loving?
It's such a good tool for navigating the online world.
Yeah.
It cuts through all the noise, the drama, the negativity. It helps us focus on what really matters.
Imagine if everyone used that filter for their online interactions.
Right.
What would that do for our families, our communities, the world?
I think social media could become a place where people actually feel safe to share their thoughts and feelings, to connect with each other in a meaningful way,
Right.
to build a more compassionate and understanding world.
Instead of being a source of division and negativity, it could be a tool for spreading love, hope, and unity.
It could be.
And it starts with us.
It does.
The choices we make every time we pick up our phones and engage with the digital world.
So let's make a commitment right here, right now, to tame our thumbs, to use our voices online for good, and to create a more positive, loving online experience.
For ourselves and for others.
Let's be mindful, intentional, purposeful in how we interact online. Always striving to reflect the love and grace of Christ in everything we do.
It's a challenge, but it's a good one.
It is.
Because, ultimately how we communicate online, it shows who we really are.
It does.
And I think deep down, we all have the capacity for love, kindness, and compassion.
Let's unleash that goodness online. Let's be the change. And let's never underestimate the power of a kind word, a thoughtful comment, a simple act of digital love.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Untamable Thumb.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope this is giving you some insights and some practical tools for navigating social media.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those thumbs tamed.
And remember, even in this huge digital world, your voice matters. Your choices matter. You have the power to make a positive impact.